welcome to Reading Your Way to Heaven. This is Jason, and as always with me, Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, how are you?
Jason, I think maybe we've turned a corner here. It seems like maybe it's not as brutally hot as it's been. Could it be that fall is approaching, or have I just ruined it?
You know, you can always have those Indian summers, so...
Yeah, but I don't think that's what we're facing here. I think fall's a coming.
That's good.
And I, for one, am really thankful for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, that's weather talk. I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Tired, but okay. And I'm tired because this is the first time, I think, in Reading Your Way to Heaven, in the 3+ years we've been doing this, that I felt like there was too much in a chapter. And I don't think I've ever said that before. Usually it's like, oh my gosh, it's so slow, nothing's happening. This is like, okay, hang on. They just had another child, Gabe.
This was a page turner, Jason. Like, the years flew by, and so did the pages.
Like,
I was gripped. I literally underlined it. Ramborg, I think was her name.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, when did that happen? Oh my gosh. Well, at the beginning it said, like, in the springtime of Kristin's 15th year. I'm like,
right.
Whoa, we're zooming ahead here.
Yeah, we
Which
just
makes, I think,
push 3
the
years.
pace of last week's chapter just even more, like, just stand out even more, because this is kind of like, it's kind of what's happened, right? In the first chapter, we learn a little about the lineage and where Lavransdatter comes from, and a little bit about Ragnfried, and then the next thing you know, Kristin is, 8 years old, or however many years old, right? Then it zooms ahead, and Ulfhild's been born, and it's been 3 years at least, and that whole incident happens. And then in chapter 4, we just stay there, right? Maybe a few months pass by, but we kind of just camp out there, and it's rough. And then we jump years again. So here we are, Kristin's 15, and everybody is that much older. And, oh, by the way, there's a third child.
Well, I mean, this is chapter 5. And in chapter 5, I was trying to think of, is there a good way to give, like last week, a 2 to 3 sentence synopsis without it being all over the place? And it's really hard, because Kristin's getting betrothed. There's a little love connection, or I don't know. Well, Kristin never outright.
How about this? Kristin grows up.
Okay.
There you go. Like, and all the stuff that entails, the betrothal, the love, the confusion.
But then you have returning favorites coming back, and Brother Edvin.
Oh, I know it. Oh my gosh. I was so stoked to see his name.
You have Lavran back in action, back at full strength. Things are happening there. You got beautiful scenery being portrayed here. Just so much happening. I was like, oh my gosh.
Old Arnie. Finsbrecken? Old Arnie.
Yes.
Son of Gerd? No, I don't know. I don't remember
something
the names
like
from last week.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess kind of breaking it up in chunks here. So the first part of this chapter obviously is all surrounding this arranged marriage between these two families of Lavran and Andres and their children. So Lavran's daughter and Andres' son.
Yeah.
Whose name is Simon.
That's correct. And they come from a family called, um, what is it? The
Gudmundsson
Driffen? Well, Gudmundsson of Dyfrin. That's
of
what it is.
Dyfrin.
So Andres Gudmundsson of Dyfrin.
Right.
Yeah.
And basically these two families are kind of the top two landowner families in this town. And by bringing these two families together, it's kind of a no-brainer for the community, and it now makes Lavran the largest landowner of Jugengard.
Yeah, yeah. In the village, yeah, absolutely. No, and it does touch a little bit on just over the years. Like, not only has Lavran's recovered and come to full strength, but the years have been good for him. He's made some good choices. He's a wise, prudent man, and that's worked out for him and for his family, financially, status, just in what he's able to provide. He's done well, not just for his family, but for the people that are in his care, the people who work for him, the people who he has entrusted to take care of certain areas, right? A little bit later on, we hear that Tordis and her husband, who, if you remember, used to live right next door to Lavrans and Ragfried. This is the place where Kristin was going to go that night to go sleep. Now they are in charge of, some bigger places. So yeah, Lavrans has done really well. And so
it's kind of like Monopoly in the game Monopoly, where you're owning these pieces of property. Now you're placing the houses on your property. He's doing well.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and so, yeah, like you said, we've got, the two biggest or most well-respected families in this region coming together. And that makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. And, Kristin, it does talk a little bit about how she's turning into a beautiful young woman. She's growing and apparently the person that she's betrothed to, Simon,
bless his heart.
Well, no, there's lots of nice things said about him, actually. Like he is handsome. They do say that he's heavyset, right? So has a short neck and a round face, but not ugly. Right? They made a point to say that he's not ugly, and apparently surprisingly agile. like I thought that was kind of funny that he was light-footed and quick and agile and was an able sportsman.
Yeah, but again, I think the author really kind of is trying to build him up. And yes, there is some positive attributes that are given to him, but there's also as the chapter goes on, of how he's winning over Uvild and his and Ragenfried and the whole area, and even Lavran is he's like, listen, he's still a young man, and sometimes he's very emotional and can be maybe a little short-tempered or just boisterous. He still does well with around the men, which all sounds great. But then near the end of the chapter, Kristin's like, yeah, I think and I forgot what it was called. It was funny because I was just at a training about this. And it's one of those things where when you are faced with a situation, like, when you're a child, and I'm going to, trust me, this is going somewhere. When you have a little child that falls down and then they immediately look at you and they go, should I be crying? Should I, they're looking at us to see what is our reaction to the situation. If we freak out, they're going to freak out. We all know this type of situation that occurs. So I feel like Kristin is in this situation here, and she's like, okay, he's a fine man, but not the guy that I saw myself really marrying. And he's got pretty hair, but I don't know if I find him for lack of better terms, sexually attractive to me. But I can grow to love his moon face and his portly way, and so she kind of builds this up because everybody else around her is projecting this of like, no, 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 he's good, he's good. But then near the end of the chapter, when she's like come face to face with the reality, and she's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe his personality, his friendly nudging thing isn't quite so nice. And maybe like, and I understand she's in a kind of a negative headspace right now, but I also kind of sense it as she's not putting rose colored glasses on.
I don't know. I want to get to another chapter before I really fully understand kind of where she's at, because I do get the sense of like at the beginning, like you touched on, this guy's built up. Simon is really, he's really built up. It's like that movie that gets overhyped, you know? And you're like, all right, this is going to be the greatest movie I've ever seen in my life.
He's the Avatar.
And it's a good movie, right? But it's not the greatest one you've ever seen in your life. And it's like, oh, so there's almost, it's almost unfair to Simon. Like he can only let her down. There's no way he could be what everyone has built him up to be. And so it starts with that there was a slight disappointment just in the way that he appeared. She imagined something different. Yeah. And, as the families are getting to know each other and she's getting to know Simon, I think there is something about the way that he does treat her family. And in time, it does say that she starts to yearn for the betrothal, for that to happen. She starts to yearn for Simon to come, and she starts to think about him a great deal, right? And is that because she's being swept up in what everybody's feeding her? Or is it because she's like, no, I really want this, you know? Now, without getting into the details yet, later on, I think she's being hammered with lots of things and lots of different thoughts. And old Arnie's not helping her out. The situation with Ulfhild's not helping her out. But she's having kind of a freak out moment, like a panic attack of sorts. And I don't know if the feelings expressed towards Arnie are like, no, this is really what I mean towards old Simon. Is really legitimately like how she feels about him, or because she wasn't really wanting Arnie either, right? Like,
right.
It was kind of like, I don't know what I want.
Right.
And there's this whole kind of freak out panic, and maybe that's legit. Maybe that really is how she feels. But it did leave me wanting. Like, I was like, I want to keep reading and see where we're actually at here. But anyway, that was kind of my impression as I was reading it. Yeah.
I totally get that. And that's, I think that's very reasonable to, hold judgment until we can continue on to see how this relationship continues. And the fact that we haven't really heard a whole heck of a lot from Simon, from his point of view, his speech, everything else. We're kind of getting this all secondhand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't mind jumping around because I know we did that last week and I kind of liked it. So I want to just jump into that part of Arn, and then we'll jump back. But okay, so Arn starts basically hitting on Kristin in this chapter.
He's got one shot, and he's like, "It's now or never.
Yeah.
I got to just take this shot." Absolutely.
I don't know if you've ever been in that type of situation where I personally have. I've been in a situation where I had a girl who was a longtime friend, and then puberty hits, and then you start looking at your friend differently, but she doesn't see you in that light because you've always been childhood friends. But you see her in a different light, and she just is like, nope, friend zoned. And so I was like, oh, Arn, oh, buddy, been there. It's not fun, but gotta let it go.
It's interesting because last chapter there was a moment where back when Kristin was like, I don't know, 11 or whatever, however old she was.
That's about right.
When she was picking herbs with Fru Shield, and Arnie was tending to their horses. And there was a comment, a line, and we didn't really touch on it then, But she says something like when she was younger, whenever she would read about knights or
That's right.
kings or, just heroes, right?
Mm-hmm.
She would always imagine her father in that role. Like that was the face that these, men would have. But recently, then, Arnie was starting to feel that. Like that was the placeholder, And I did think a little bit like, oh, okay, could this possibly be something where there's a relationship that comes out of this? Like she's starting to see Arnie a little bit in that capacity. And it kind of goes on. It doesn't really go further after that. It just kind of mentions it and kind of the storyline continues.
Right.
But fast forwarding to here, we see that like maybe there is a closeness. There is an affection that she has for Arnie. Clearly, she loves
Yes.
him. I mean,
Yes.
this is like, brother, like you said. But she does make it very clear to him that she just doesn't see him in that way, right? And is that because she's just not letting herself see him in that way?
Right.
Because
I
of the
felt like
roles?
that was kind of where the author was trying to lead us.
Uh-huh.
Because, there's plenty of time, like throughout the conversation between those two, she kind of trailed off a lot.
She does. She does trail off, and she does put up with his advances.
Right.
Far more than I thought she would.
Mm-hmm.
So
even my wife, when we were reading it, my wife was like, uh-oh.
Right?
Because from the female perspective, she was like, oh no, I know where Arn's going.
Oh, he's getting pretty aggressive. Yeah.
As the kids say, he was like, simping.
Well, I'm like, Ulfhild's with them. Like, she's there.
That's what I was thinking too. I'm like, where is she?
Like, this guy is bold. Yeah, I know Lavrans isn't around, or Ragnfrid isn't around, or old Inga and Gerd his parents aren't around, but Ulfhild's still there. like, and this guy is like, like, hey, can I sit next to you? And she's like, well, you're gonna get these clothes dirty. She's folding her dad's clothes, and he's like, oh, is that what you think? I'm just gonna make you dirty? And she's like, no, like, I don't want to make these clothes dirty. Wash up, and then you can sit down. And then like that little opening he takes, and then the next thing you know, he's laying his head on her lap. He's got his arms around her, giving her a hug. It's really strong. That's the other part I thought too, was like, this is not just like, let me be real with you, but it was like laying it on thick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was, like you said, he was shooting a shot, and I think it was just a mix of a lot of things happening with Kristin. I think, like you said, I think it would be naive to say that she never thought of him that way. And you brought up an excellent point from the last chapter that there may have been inklings there, but between the friendship, but then also her duty as someone in the honor towards Simon and towards her family, and knowing that she should not and cannot even entertain this for the sake of herself, for the sake of Simon, because she mentions that too in that conversation. She's like, I quickly tried to start picturing Simon's face in this instance, but also for her family and for her father.
Yeah, and there is that sense of duty there too. But I do think that duty thought, like when she was trying to think those things that you're talking about, was definitely her trying to console herself.
Yes.
Right. Because there's that moment also where, the advances of Arnie, the resisting of that, the duty to Simon, but Ulfhild has an accident. Her cane gets stuck in some rocks, or her crutch gets stuck in some rocks. She falls. She, busts her lip up. She's bleeding. She's having a hard time. And it's right at the right time.
Yes.
Which is really weird to say, but it is, because it breaks up this weird moment between Arnie and Kristin. And so they both rush to Ulfhild, and they're tending to her, right? And she Kristen carries her off to their home, and I guess Arnie kind of fades away after a bit. And so in these thoughts, she's taking care of Othilde, and she remembers Brother Edvin. She remembers how he talked to her about miracles and about faith, and about even vocation, right? And she recalls the conversation that he said that parents always want to give their best children away in marriage, and then the ones who can't get married for one reason or another, those are the ones that go to the convent or the monastery and become, enter into religious life or the priesthood. And here we go. We have this family, Kristen, betrothed to be engaged, to be married, right, to Simon, and Ulfhild, who suffered this accident, who's, now maimed. Well, she's going to go off to the convent, right? Right. And so Kristen has this thought of maybe if I forsook, maybe if I forsake what the world offers me, if I give to God myself, there can be grace, there can be a miracle for Ulfhild. And then she has that moment of maybe fear, maybe a longing, like fear of letting go. And she's like, I don't know if I can, because I do love the line here is that she loves the world too much,
Mm-hmm.
right? Something like she loved the world and longed for the world. Well, it sounds terrible, right? Except we all do,
Mm-hmm.
It's scary to let go. And this is something she knows, and there's going to be status, and there's going to be acceptance, and there's going to be comfort, and there's going to be all these things. And on the other side, she doesn't know, and it's scary, and none of that stuff is there, right? So she's like, I couldn't do it. So that glimmering thought of maybe I do this gets shut down because of her longing for the world, and now she's trying to comfort herself. Like, well, it's okay. I couldn't do it even if I wanted to, because it would I would betray what my father wants me to do, or I would ruin, I'd hurt Simon's feelings, and this is where justification is happening.
Right. And the conversation when you were saying that, or that really gets the ball rolling here, and it was right when Uville starts screaming because she fell, was when Arn says, basically, tell me, would you rather have been with me? And she says, I would rather. And then I think for the first time here, where it says she sat in silence for a moment, I would rather not have any man at all. I think this was the first time that, like you said, she's been challenged by Arn. She's wrestling with all this, and for the first time, she's really thinking about it and letting her what she truly feels come out of her. And that's where it leads into what you were saying of, she feels that I don't want to be married. I don't want to join the convent. I just want to be left alone to be in this world. And again, it's not saying that, oh, that's great, because she knows it's not great. And we know that that's not ultimately what she wants, but it's almost I don't know what I want, but I know I don't want this. And right now, the old Augustine, I want to, make me chaste, make me holy, but not today, kind of feeling with Kristen here. So let's transition, because this is, I think, is a good place to transition to kind of all the Catholicism, either innuendos or blatant parts throughout this chapter, because there was a lot more of that peppered in here. What did you think of with any of those parts, like with Uvild being taken by Ragnfried and Lavran to the church?
The pilgrimage, Jason.
Heck yeah, buddy. Yeah.
Totally underlined that. Look at them.
And she gets better.
An effective one. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Absolutely. One other thought I had, going back to what you were saying, based on the book, about the thought process of Kristin and like, oh, if I go to comment without perform a miracle, I was like, oh man, I wrote I wrote on the side of like, she's totally Ragenfried's daughter, because that is the Ragenfried mindset of like, if I do something for
The
God, I'll
willing
get
to
some.
bargain. Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Back
Yeah.
to like Catholic moments throughout here. A lot of Saint Olaf talk here.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Sure. There's the pilgrimage that we just touched on where Lavrans and Ragnfried take Ulfhild, and it's effective. I mean, she's not restored to full health, but she's able to move around with a crutch, which is a massive improvement from what it was before. Honestly, frankly, when we zoomed ahead to year 15 and Ulfhild hadn't made her appearance yet, I was thinking like, did she pass away? Like, do we not have her anymore? No, we do. She's still around, and she's doing better. She's not great. She's not ever going to be all the way 100%.
Right.
But better than what she was. And praise be God. Like there's faith here, right? And found that kind of interesting too, right? It was, I suppose, the biggest improvement, the biggest sign came from this huge act of faith of Lavrans and Ragnfried not going with anyone. Right, just the two of them carrying their daughter to the shrine of Saint Olaf to beg for his intercession on behalf of their daughter.
You see also just little nods here and there of the faith still being played out with respect to the bells ringing in Olaf's church and Vespers,
yeah,
and all that. You have Father Eric comparing Kristin to a beautiful mare in his homily, which is okay.
Was that in a homily?
All right, maybe not in a homily, but maybe it was
just talking. Yeah,
just talking. But
yeah. I mean, like, I love the line here. Lavrans like nothing better than to hear Sarah Eric boast about Kristin, right? This girl that Sarah Eric has seen and probably baptized, seen grow up.
Well, he said,
like
taught her how to read and write, and
that's right. The only thing he didn't like was hearing occasionally the priest compare his daughter to a flawless and glossy coated young mare. I think Sarah Eric means the best out of that, but
right.
Yeah, I could understand why Lavrans maybe just didn't think that was.
I mean, because that's the thing is, I mean, from the descriptions, I mean, Kristin is a beautiful woman, becoming a beautiful woman here, and in Frua Shield, because we get a shout out there. Of people, we kind of get a little update with her. Basically, everybody's cool with her now, and just kind of taking her rightful place back in the community, in the village. But she kind of makes a comment to Kristin of basically like, you should not be a part of this village. You're too beautiful, and you're so head and shoulders above everybody else. You belong to the greater cities and the greater kingdoms out there. And I think that's also a little nugget that's in Kristin's head from Frua Shield, just that constant communication and talking about these greater kingdoms and lands out there.
Speaking of someone who does give Simon an endorsement, maybe not the most ringing of endorsements, but still an endorsement nonetheless, right? I was like, okay. It was a little bit of confusion. Like, as I was reading it, even I was like, wait, what? But
doesn't Kristin also like? I'm kind of.
Oh, she's confused too.
Okay,
she's like I don't know what she's saying, but I get that she likes Simon, and I like she's flattered by that. Like, you can tell Kristin likes that people like Simon.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. Like, that's part of it. Like, she is. See, that's the thing is that pocket where she said, just to get back to this a little bit, when she says, "I don't want any man," right? That's kind of like when you're like, "Wait, what? What did I like?" I don't think she even knew she was going to say that. I don't think she even knew that. That was kind of like the subconscious just jumping out.
Yep.
And then catching her by surprise. And even Arnie's like, he totally didn't see that coming. He's like, "What? You'd rather be in a convent?" And she's like, I don't know what I want, right? But then as she does entertain that thought about the convent, she's like, oh, but this idea of being married, though, and the acceptance that comes with that, that's really comfortable. And I kind of like, I do kind of like that. Like, I do kind of like the status that would bring, and the comfort and how that's respected. And even like through a shield as someone who's like, yeah, he's a good match. And I mean, everyone is saying that. So I think there's that stroking of ego that is in all of us that is hard to turn off, and that's a little bit of what she's struggling with too. But to get back to the Catholic stuff, definitely Olaf plays a huge part going to visit his shrine. It's the Church of St. Olaf that the bells are ringing for Vespers. It's later on when she's done helping Ulfhild get settled in that she runs to the church where there's the cross where it said that St. Olaf had prayed, and she prays. And so it is beautiful. Like we've touched on it over the last few weeks, but it's beautiful to see the faith lived out in these people. Like it's part of them. It's not just like, yeah, this is something we do on Sundays, but no, like she's having a hard time. And what does she do? She goes to pray because that's what's in her. Like, I've got to go pray and ask for help. And just even what happened after that just was beautiful.
And that leads into kind of the next big chunk with Brother Edvin. And just the only thing
what a John the Baptist, man,
and I was gonna say, like, that's kind of leads into, as you're saying, living out the faith. It totally made me think of Brother Edvin and just his descriptions of his prayer fasting that he's demonstrating and showing. And it's because he knows he's a sinner, and he knows that the world is sinful, and he wants to save his soul and save as many souls as he can for the kingdom of God, and willing to let fleas bite him because he hears of the people internally of the church biting at each other. I was like, oh,
made penance, right?
Brother.
Like mortification and penance, just to offer this suffering up. Like, okay, I'll endure this, right? Or like refusing to come inside or to take a bath because, like, no, like then that would get rid of these things that are biting me, and there's a reason why I'm tolerating that or putting up with that because I'm offering it up. The wanting to sleep outside, not even wanting to eat his food inside, and wanting to eat simple food, right? Not meat, but simple stuff. And finally, he's coaxed inside, of course, but to eat, but not to take a bath or to get his clothes washed or to sleep inside. But yeah, I definitely got John the Baptist vibes, and just the beautiful devotion of this man and the faith and the just the example that he is. And I loved, like, when Lavrans was asking, like, can you please pray for Ulfhild the way you prayed for, apparently, I mean, this man he isn't going to say he did it, but he's
the
been
gift
part
of
a
healing.
miracle, a healing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some boy that he helped pray over was miraculously healed. And I mean, Lavrans is looking for the same, of course.
Of course. I mean, any father that would hear and know about that. And so just that plea. And you can see also Kristin, who has been obviously thinking about Brother Edvin for years, and here he comes at one of the hardest points in her life where she is struggling to figure out, what is the Lord calling me to do? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And here he comes, the one spiritual guide in her life that she remembers. And I loved the, I guess, prayer / words of wisdom that he gives to Ulfhild and then gives to Kristin at the end.
I literally underlined every word he said in that prayer at the end as he gave it to Kristin. Not every word he said, period, but in that section there at the end. Because, I mean, just so holy. How about what he tells Lavrans, right? That it's better to pray for you and Ragfried to want God's will here.
Mm-hmm.
because God's got a plan for her, and you don't want to get in the way with that. And Lavransdatter is like, but you healed this boy over here. And he's like, well, let me tell you about that boy. The mom was a widow. There was no other child. And guess what she was asking for? Just God to take care of her boy in whatever way that would be. And so I just joined together in her prayers. Like, there's no, I want this thing. No, it's, I want your will, God. And I trust you that you will take care of my son. Please take care of my son. Like, what a beautiful prayer. And yeah, he joins in, and that's where this boy is healed. This is not the disposition of Lavransdatter and Ragnfried. And
No.
I don't want to trash them, because I understand it too. I would feel the same way,
Of course.
But yeah, it's definitely different. And God has a plan for Oldfield. And Edvin just beautifully points that out. I kind of want to, I don't know if you want to say anything else, but I really want to look at what he tells Kristin, right?
So right before that, and I'll let you say that part, was the part with Lavran. And this is the part that I loved probably. It just got me, where he says, this is Brother Edvin, don't you think that in God's eyes we are all like children for whom he has reason to grieve, crippled as we are by sin, and yet we don't think that things are the worst in the world for us.
Yeah.
And just
that was powerful. I
so
mean, powerful.
good. And just I mean,
like the presumption a little bit, like, oh, like, of course my daughter Oldfield, things are going to be so terrible for her because of this, malady that she's having to suffer. But what about us?
Right.
We don't think that about ourselves.
Right.
We're maimed by sin.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, powerful, Jason.
So the last, I'm assuming you're talking about the last paragraph and on page 73.
Yeah. So the next morning comes, Kristin meets him out before he leaves for breakfast. Nobody else is awake or moving around. And she brings him just a simple little meal. And she walks with him for a bit.
We also find out Simon gives Kristin a dog.
He gave her a dog, yeah.
Like,
a fine
what?
dog. A wonderful dog.
Yeah.
And again, like, and there's some pride there. But like, she feels like, awesome that here's this dog that is a friendly, good dog, and not many people have pets. And it kind of like further build on the idea of like, it feels nice to receive gifts and recognize the things that you have.
And it's the same breed as the Queen's dog.
Oh, hey.
So like I think for her, again, that's the thing that with fur, through a shield and everything, like when they start talking about kings and queens and knights and the greater kid, like that gets her ego stroking.
Yeah. And Brother Edvin also compliments the dog. That's what we're talking about, and talks about how it's the Queen's dog. Obviously, he's not trying to tie her into worldliness there, but rather just pay the dog and her a really wonderful compliment and observation. As they're walking on his way out of town, it says something like she's been wanting to talk to him about just everything. But what ends up coming out is just this simple plea: forgive me a few words, Father. Like what you did for Oldfield. And he pauses and he says to pay close attention to the way God tends to the welfare of the people here in the valley. The rain falls, little rain falls, but water comes from the mountains. Dew refreshes the meadows and fields each night. Thank God for the good gifts he has given you, and don't complain if you think you're lacking something else that you think would be beneficial. Like, just I'm hearing the words, Jason, that we've read on Wednesday's episodes from Teresa of Avila and Francis de Sales, and I'm sure we'll get to with St. Augustine. I'm just like, take joy in what God has given you. This simple humility and realization and gratitude for the gifts that God has given us, and see how he provides for us. Even when, little rain is falling, there's still water coming to take care of us and to take care of the fields. And then he says, you have beautiful golden hair, so don't fret because it's not curly. Haven't you heard about the woman who sat and wept because she had only a little scrap of pork to give to her 7 hungry children for Christmas dinner. St. Olaf came riding past at that very moment. Then he stretched out his hand over the meat and prayed to God to feed the poor urchins. But when the woman saw that a slaughtered pig lay on the table, she began to cry because she didn't have enough bowls and pots. Right? Like, what a juxtaposition here. Don't cry because you have blonde hair and it's not curly. Look at the story of this woman who is crying because she doesn't have enough food for her family, for her children. And God's grace still comes in those moments, in that moment through St. Olaf. But still, God's grace to bless them, and how God takes care of us. Very much like it's in Matthew, the whole, like, look at the birds in the trees, and they don't worry about where their foods are, and the flowers in the field, and even Solomon didn't have fine clothes such as them. And, like, doesn't your Father love you more? Right? So don't be anxious, don't worry about tomorrow. Like, that whole line in the gospel, very much like, I feel like that's what Brother Edvin is sharing here for Kristin, to kind of help her to come to a place of contentedness with the things that she's been given, and not be envious or greedy for more, or let her pride get in the way of other things.
I mean, it's definitely something that we all need to really take to heart on a daily basis, and take stock in our daily lives. And I know there's a lot of exercises out there where, to pray or write in a journal, 1 or 3 or even 5 things that, you're thankful for, that God has blessed you with, and you got to come up with a new set every day. And, at first it may be difficult, but then the more you keep doing it, the more you realize, like, wow, okay, God's blessed me with a lot here. God has given me so much. And here I am complaining about these trivial things, like you said, or like Brother says here, like, oh, I wish my hair was curly, or I wish I had blonde hair or brown hair, or I wish I had this, I wish I was taller, I wish I was skinnier, I wish I was this or that. It's like, just stop. And I mean, it's also very much of the scripture verse of, Jesus saying, God knows every hair on your head. Don't you know that he'll take care of you? He takes care of the birds. He takes care of everything and everyone. And you are much more precious in his eyes than those things.
Amen.
I think the two just random things, one is going back, we touched on it, but just again, because they mention it so briefly and it just runs right by you, of Ramborg, the youngest daughter of Lavran and Ragnfried, and Kristin's youngest sister. It's just mentioned in a mere passing, almost 2 sentences, and it's like, oh, that's a thing. Okay. I guess don't really care much about her. And then, of course, it says here, she was a strong and healthy child, though not as pretty as her sisters. It's like, oh, okay.
She almost didn't stand a chance, though, right? I mean, we had this whole, paragraph about how beautiful Kristin is becoming as a young woman, and then we have a passage, or a few lines about how, like, but if that hadn't happened to Ulfhild, she'd be even more beautiful, right? And how, she's talented and smart, and all these things. And then, like, poor Ramborg, like, what? How's she gonna compete with that? So, yes, good, strong, healthy, young child, probably even really pretty too, but not as much as her older sisters. Mm-hmm. No.
And then the last thing, and again, this is such a minor point compared to all the other big points, but it may come to play later on. Who knows? So just put it out there. Is there, because they spent a good amount of time of basically how Lavran and Ragnfried, they feel so much guilt and pain for Uvild that they don't ever say no to her, and they treat her like a queen and give her the finest things and the silks and the outfits and all this stuff. And the point of Lavran saying, there's these stealing, or these people that would steal things and then resell them as they come through the town, and Lavran would never buy anything from them because he knows where it came from. And yet this time around for Uvield, he bought it all right. He bought everything. So I don't know. It may not be anything. It may just be a side point that was just thrown out there, but it may be something further down the line. We'll see.
To that end, and just to circle back to Ramborg, I did find it interesting, just the situation, like the circumstances that she is currently living in. She's not living with Lavrans and Ragfried or Kristin or Wolfield. She's living with Tortoise and her husband in Lagenburg. And again, family, friends, people that taken care of. I think Tortoise, she had a wet nurse, right?
Right.
But just Ragnfried is still in such pain and racked with such guilt and just not in a good headspace that she's like, this baby can't stay with me because I'm not good luck to any of the children that live with me, except somehow Kristin has gotten through. But other than Kristin, like the three boys, now Ulfield, like she needs to live somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that the parents don't love her. It doesn't mean that she's not loved by her family. But it is interesting how they've let that mother's fear and anxiety like dictate the circumstances here, which, I mean, real life, obviously, that's going to have ramifications. Like it just is, Mm-hmm. And so she'd come visit when she was asleep at night. She'd hold her. Lavrans and Kristin would come visit. It wasn't like an infrequent thing, but still, like she didn't live with them. And a big piece of that was this dark cloud that still is there around Ragnfried, even if it's not quite as intense as it was in the last chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Sigrid does an amazing job of not only painting the scenery, because we didn't even discuss that part of the chapter where she's talking about the mountains and the moon, like all the scenery and the beauty of that, but she also just makes everyone feel very human, very faithful, but still flawed, because we're all flawed, and but still striving for holiness in our lives, and wrestling the real fight that happens in the human condition. And I really appreciate that. They're not immune to that.
Yeah, these are not one-dimensional characters here.
Yes.
There's definitely some layers and complexity.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's all I got. You got anything else?
No, Jason, I feel like I haven't read a bad chapter. Like it's been so good, and I've really enjoyed our time in this book so far, and I know it's a big one, so we've got weeks and weeks ahead of us.
Yes,
but
we do.
I'm looking forward to it. It's not like this, like, oh gosh, we're gonna be here a long time, like it can be sometimes. Like, no, I'm really excited about it.
Likewise. And we hope you are too, dear listeners. Thank you so much for listening each and every week. It's, we're still only a couple of chapters in, so if there's anyone out there that you think would be interested in this book, now that we're 5 chapters in, share the podcast, get them caught up, and join us on this journey with Kristin and her family. And thank you again. You can check us out on our website, readingthewaytoheaven.fireside.fm. We're on YouTube. Leave comments there, subscribe, like it, all that good stuff. And until the next one, we'll talk to you later.